destination, the confluence will be a sacred culmination of Estolian prophecy.
One point of debate within the temple has always been the concept of predestination. When a man's Bendenacera and Bendelora state unequivocally that he will encounter the keeper of his soul and enjoy the greatest of all blessings by giving it unto her on his 30th birthday. Has deity already selected a woman who will be shaped and molded over time so that she is the perfect woman to hold his soul? Or does deity merely nudge circumstances near his birthday so that the nearest woman capable of holding his soul ends up within his orbit? Osiris Zakarian, Capitulo 91.
The brush of a hand on Lia's cheek woke her up. It was Max, and she was pillowed against his chest, and his arms were around her, holding her close to his side.
Sorry, Max,
she said as she reluctantly sat up.
No problem, liar. I was quite comfortable with you in my arms. It was nice to sleep with you.
Before she could turn brick red at that assertion, he informed her.
We will be landing in Estolia soon.
She looked around, seeing that the others were mostly still asleep. The world outside the jet was quite dark. Across the central aisle, Zeke was awake, looking very relaxed.
Captain Prescott tells me we will land at the Amador airport prior to sunrise. Seeing Estolia for the first time in the sheen of a beautiful dawn is very special.
What makes it so special?
She asked. Zeke and Max looked at each other before Max answered.
I don't know what makes it so special, but it is. Estolia is a beautiful land, and from the top of Mount Estoliana, you can watch it rise over Mount Zacharias. If the weather cooperates, the rising sun will paint the clouds every color of the rainbow.
Lia was touched by Max's words. They were poetic and beautiful. He was clearly a man who admired beauty in all its forms.
There will be quite the procession once we land,
Zeke said.
Procession?
Max asked. With a wave towards where Rhea slept, Zare's arms around her, Zeke said,
The acolytes have prepared the royal seclusion suite, and Rhea and Zare will go straight there, bypassing all the pomp and circumstance. This way, they will be able to truly begin their seclusion.
What else, Uncle?
My brother will be there, of course,
Zeke said.
And your cousin Leon. Lilane, Keterin, and Callista will all remain at the palace.
Zeke scowled slightly as he finished speaking.
In that case, I imagine we will make all haste to the palace.
He surprised Lia by pulling her close for an exuberant hug.
I am so excited, liar. I just know you will love Estolia. It is absolutely the best country in the world. I'm quite pleased to be going home.
He added,
Do you know how to ride?
Ride? Horses?
She asked. Both men laughed.
I think that is one thing we always neglect to tell visitors.
Zeke said.
In Estolia, we have no love for motor vehicles. Nearly all personal transportation is via horse. It is a small island, roughly 30 miles by 35 miles. While it is not easy, it is possible to travel from one end to the other in a single day on horseback. Those who wish to visit family living on the other side of the island sometimes opt to travel via rail, which is how we transport cargo around the island. When there are emergencies, we have helicopters that can be used for rapid transport.
I've never ridden a horse,
Lia admitted.
though I have always wanted to learn.
Well, I will teach you.
Max said.
We will ride up to watch the dawn on Mount Estoliana one morning.
I'd really like that.
Lia said. The sound of the engines changed. They were preparing to land. Zeb woke just then and stretched, looking out the window at the darkness with a smile of pleasure. It was the first smile she had ever seen grace his face. Of everyone Lia had met, his pleasure at coming home seemed more acute than most. Mystery surrounded the handsome Zeb.
I am looking forward to being home,
Zeke said.
It was hard to leave in the first place, but sometimes when duty calls, there is no choice.
The airplane set down at an airport with a single runway, with a couple of hangars and one other building. It looked more like an addition to a field than a modern airport. She shared her thoughts with Max and Zeke.
We do not allow foreign tourists,
Zare said.
Guests are allowed, of course, but we have a very strict policy when it comes to others. When people visit, they often enter Estolia at our more formal airport on the northern island of Pequeño.
Just then the door opened, and the cool dawn air wafted into the cabin. Laya watched as the flight attendants, Captain Prescott, Zeke, Max, Rhea, and Zeb, all closed their eyes and inhaled deeply, smiling at the scent that reached them. To Laya it smelled fresh and crisp with the scent of trees, flowers, and the sea. Catherine waited calmly in the large sitting room. She knew her husband would be with her soon. She felt it the instant he touched Estolian soil. She hoped they would not have to spend too much time socializing. She wanted nothing more than to lead her husband through the palace corridors to their chambers and quietly seduce him. Her eyes met Lilaine's, and the two women smiled. Lilaine was sympathetic to the emptiness that went along with having Zeke on the other side of the planet. No other Estolian woman could possibly comprehend how she felt. No other woman had to yield up her soul. Zeke, as keeper, held her soul, just as she held his. The women of Estolia did not know what the men went through adhere to this religion. Her role was unique. It was the only way that her husband had the strength to lead the nation, and it gave him insight into the people he led. She glanced over at Emerald. Her oldest daughter was so awkward, tall, dark, and bone-thin. Catherine often imagined how Emerald would change when she found a man to love. She would blossom once she kept a man's soul. Through the unique, almost telepathic link created by their union, she would be able to sense his emotions in all things, including his true feelings when he looked at her. Catherine suspected Emerald would undergo a radical transformation once she was fleshed out with pregnancy, adored by the man who was lucky enough to find her. She felt the peace of knowing that for Emerald, love would come, and perhaps her self-perception of ugliness was the necessary trial that would result in the greatest ultimate joy. She suddenly felt the urge to place her vision on canvas. After her reunion with her husband and the recharging that would come from being together again, she would go to her studio and paint her eldest daughter's portrait. Paint her as her future husband would see her. The first person to enter the room was Zeb. He looked joyful to be home, crossing the space swiftly to embrace his mother. Max entered the room next, followed by a redhead that she thought was Rhea, but this girl had larger, pale-colored eyes. This must be the woman who Max discovered was to keep his soul. Finally, Zeke entered the room. Time ceased. Nothing existed but the swift arrowing of love between them. She moved towards him, even as he crossed to her. When he embraced her, she exhaled on a sigh of deep contentment to be in contact with the man who was in all ways her very soul, just as she was his.
"I am grateful for your return, Ezekiel,"
she said to him.
As am I.
He replied. He reached up to touch her face, his thumb rubbing fondly over the sprinkle of freckles.
With deity's approbation, the confluence will be a sacred culmination of Estolian prophecy.